Yep, you are seeing this correctly. That is my old skid plate from my Polaris Razor. That's what I actually built the original TOYBOTA chassis off of, or at least the front skid plate, but I've been very bad. I know some of you guys will be a little disappointed, but I have been moving forward on some of the ideas I had yesterday off camera. Check it out. Now, as ridiculous as this looks, my friends, it's a little uneven right now just from the weight distribution, but look at the front now, the way I've molded the bow to be going for the water to be pushing underneath the truck. And also look at this. I decided to do the full skid. And the reason I've decided to do this, and yes, I will be covering up the holes for the differential pumpkin housing, really is because once this vehicle starts to get up to any kind of speed, I wanted to make sure it had enough of a surface area on the bottom to actually help lift it on top of the water. Now, do I expect it to be lifted high out of the water? Of course not. In fact, welcome back, I should say. Hey, I've just jumped right into it because I'm excited, and I know many people have been watching this project over the weeks with me while I've been working on it here. Again, just to reintroduce, this is a TRiBUTE truck, not a replica, of the Top Gear BBC TOYBOTA, or the Nissank, done by Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond and James May, of course. And I wanted to do, like we're coming up on 1 billion views here, so I wanted to do something a little bit exciting, 1 billion total views on the channel. And to get back to the project itself, when I was thinking about the older skid plate I had, here it is. This is what I had built originally, okay? And this had only gone halfway. And the reason I was going to do that was because obviously by using a full skid plate like I am on the bottom, it really limits the off-wheel or off-roading that I can do, right? The four-wheel drive capability is not going to be there in this vehicle. Here's Jeremy right there in the original TOYBOTA #1, where they were actually having some, this is when they were stopped and they were bailing out the cab because it was taking on too much water. They went from the highway where they bounced along in this truck all the way to a boat launch and then drove into the reservoir itself, and then tried to cross it. And one of the issues they had, and we'll go through some pictures because I wanted to go over why I redesigned this here. Let's do that right now. Here we saw yesterday, this was the original TOYBOTA, right? And the giant 225 horsepower Honda engine that he had on the back. He wanted 2 of them, but the weight of it just wasn't gonna happen. Plus he's also got the steering on the inside. Let's go to the next one. The thing that really got to me was when I studied the video of the first one, they did have a full skid plate underneath, and it does kind of come to a bow in the middle, and it kind of protected the tires where the water would be flowing and kind of going under the tires, giving it a little bit of lift. Overall, they flipped over when Jeremy turned too quickly and the whole truck kind of rolled over. Now, when they were driving, they had this problem where the nose was too heavy and Jeremy wanted to go, Jeremy wanted to go as fast as he could, and it kept plowing down into the water. So as I continued to study and have a look at it, here it is in full, where they're really taking water on into the cab, and it was coming through the air vents and everything like that. Now, fortunately for me, I'm running a radio control vehicle, and I don't have as much weight, but I certainly do have quite a bit. But I've got the whole inside covered with foam. There is a second reason why I've gone ahead with this other chassis, okay? Now, I did go in, this chassis itself, I basically hand carved. I went in, cut pieces off of my Razor skid plate that was old, and then just heated it up, hand molded it, made sure that these rails were basically like 2 skis that'll help come up and float up onto the water. but got in there, kind of chiseled around, made sure I could mount it up properly. And then what I did was I gave the body a lift in the back, because for those that have been following this project, I had a bit of a problem where I have so much foam tucked in on the inside here, it was kind of bending the back tray in the rear of the UTE. And so what I did was I actually fabbed a spacer back there that lifts up and gives me the ability to put in a little bit of extra flotation if that's what I need. And of course, the suspension is pretty much maxed out, but it's not so heavy that it's crushing the tires at all. On the front, you know, everything's kind of attached to each other, so the leaf spring suspension, you know, it's going to be a bumpy ride. If you guys look at this and have been following along, I used a door hinge that's on a spring, and it looks ludicrous when it's way up high like that. I totally get it. This whole project is ludicrous to begin with, and I'm just doing it for fun to see if I could even, you know, achieve something like this. Now, I was able to adjust the angle of the outboard motor right there so I can bring it up or down, and the reason I've done that, and the reason I gave the lift here, was because I've got the suspension a little more maxed out. When this is in the water and it's actually starting to float like this, it's going to give me more of an angle for when we're having propulsion to get up on top of the water, is my plan, I hope. And then of course I've got to kind of dial in this motor to find out where it will properly sit. Now, you'll notice it does have this flat stabilizer right here. And of course, the rudder that comes down is quite long. This is actually for a Stiletto Pro boat that they don't make anymore. It is an electric motor. We covered this in the last episode that I did. And I was thinking I could probably shave quite a bit of this off. And still, you know, we don't really have to worry about high speeds, right? This isn't, the prop wash should be enough moving back and forth just to maneuver this whole truck. Now, my thing is do I need this up on an angle, right? Because it does look silly, but silly in a fun way. Or do I somehow figure out, like, leave this brace in place, leave this middle piece, maybe cut off this whole top, take this piece right here, cinch it up, and then it's just kind of like a bracket that holds this whole thing. And if I cut it, I still would probably have quite a bit of clearance at the back. But do I want to do that right now? I don't know. Here's the other problem that I'm worried about. Look at the hinge. While it's in the water, are we going to see any of this? The bounce, right? Because the spring only pops in around here. So as it's pushing forward, I get it, we're getting the forward, but just the force of the water, is it going to be causing some sort of bounce? So yes, I could add a hook in here to kind of hold it nice and steady and make sure it was firm, or I could remove the whole thing, but then I would lose the ability to kind of move it up and down unless I fabricated something else, like on a slider like this, you know, up here, which is possible, but I'm still brainstorming, trying to get through what I want to do here. I did like the hinge idea, but I'm growing less fond of it. So I'm going to take the body off and show you how I've changed the flotation, because with the longer chassis plate on the bottom, of course, I was able to increase the length of the flotation devices here, and I'll show you how I did it. Aha, and now that you can see it up close, you can see the advantages of keeping that long skid plate. So more flotation ability. What I did was I took some of that pool noodle here, I just cut it in half, and I placed it underneath the transfer case protective shield. These drive shafts are on an angle now, so everything I've done has kind of been angled myself. So when I push it in place, you can see there that even though I'm going to have a top piece that keeps it down, that's still going to allow for a little extra flotation. Now, if you guys want to revisit this, most of the cab here, except for where the battery sits for the truck itself, the shifting servo for this transmission, and a little spot for the motor right here, All of this is foam. So I would like to get in here, and a lot of people have said, well, hey, why don't you use some spray foam to help fill in the gaps? And really the answer to that is because there are a lot of moving parts here. And not only are there moving parts, but the parts that are here, it's important that they stay cool, especially while they're carrying all this extra gear, right? So by keeping an open space around here, I'm hoping that the cab itself being attached to the front of the frame, plus possibly the more lift of this larger, crazy looking bumper right here is actually going to help raise the truck out of the water more. Here we go. It definitely weighs more with the skid plate, but let's see how it floats. Aha! Look at this. Okay, I am taking on some water in the back, so we definitely need some flotation there. But that's not too bad. Look at my motor. I am holding it a little bit, and that wind's giving me a little bit of problem. But check it out. Now my bumper definitely is lifted out of the water. I don't have to worry about plowing into the water as much. And then back here, the water is definitely not getting into where the motor area is. So if I have that foam block on underneath here, that thick foam, I think I'm actually going to have enough flotation. Okay, so what have I learned out of the experiment I just did with the flotation? And I had to think about it before I went on camera here to see what I actually did learn. And what I learned was, even though I've raised the back and we have a better resting area for the motor, the larger surface area on the bottom is causing instability. Now this is when we get to Jeremy's second attempt at the truck boat, and it was the Nissan. And we talked about this before. Let's have a look at the Nissan here. So the Nissan itself actually has floating barrels on either side. In fact, they were strapped on either side of the back box or the back tray with two steel beams, it seems. Let's have a look at it differently here. Here's the barrel right here. You guys may not be able to see it very well, but you can see the end right there and the two straps that go across. And then of course Jeremy's able to stand there and he's got a steering wheel basically right behind the headache rack. Now the motor for him is a different type of motor than mine, the way mine's modeled, and his is almost basically right in the water as well. It's attached right to his truck, and so I'm still struggling if I want to do that or not, but check it out. Let's go to the next photo here. Okay, here's where they're having problems still. So they started taking on water, and even though they had the stabilizing barrels on the back, they started, plowing through the water. Now, you guys can't really see that unless I go like that. So with him plowing and the water going over the bow, of course, it's making everything sink down, and that's no good. Here's a good shot of Hammond falling out when they actually get to where they were going. And the barrel actually has like this deflective shield on the front. So it's not just a flat surface that would have been holding them back, pushing or pushing the cab down. In fact, it would have been deflecting water off to the side. So that's something I want to have a look at. So let's back up the camera. Okay, so now we understand more about the stabilizer bars on the truck itself, even though it was a Nissan, and this is a Land Cruiser. Let's back it up even more. So now I'm wondering about the length of the motor, right, plus the stabilization. Now that I have it floating in the water where I'd like it to be, it's a little bit too low in the back. So I was thinking, here is a longer pipe. It's that 2-inch PVC pipe that I use for watering the racetrack when I've got the races going on. And this is just some extra piping I had laid off to the side. I actually cut it the same size as a pool noodle would sit right here. And of course, Nick, there you go, buddy. I know Nick, my buddy on YouTube there, was talking about putting the pool noodle inside the barrel itself, and that was a great idea. Okay, both are done. It'd be like that. That's about right across the back of the tray. Now, that's quite a bit of flotation. I don't mind that at all. Probably want it right about there. But maybe I should leave this step until later. And the only reason I'm thinking that is because I still want to think about steering and the interior that I'm going to do. So I want to make sure not to, put a cross brace where I want to put something else first. The other thing I think I want to do is actually take a chance on it and move this tray. I'm going to remove this hinge for now. And it will remove my ability to take it up and down like that, but it's also going to remove quite a bit of this weight. It's not a lot, but it's enough that I think that it would make a difference if I do this right. And I think all I need to do is replace this middle plate with another piece of plastic roughly about that tall. Okay, so many of you are clapping right now because this is so much cleaner than what I had yesterday. Everything is basically ready to be mounted up again without the hinge. Now, things I've had to consider, of course, is the steering horn. The steering horn for the motor has to be clear for the linkage, of course, to pull it back and forth, as well as how the truck sits in the water compared to the giant rudder we have right here on the back, right? Because when I'm driving from the land into the water, I don't want to have the rudder, of course, hitting the ground on the way in. And at the same time, I have to have the motor low enough that when it is floating, we have to have the motor level in the water and the truck, of course, the nose coming up and out. So I think we're very, very close now, and I'm gonna go ahead and put the bolts through. I'm gonna measure it out, put the bolts through, and I should be able to slide this motor up and down just a little bit, which does help. We'll see if I have to cut this rudder down. I hope not, because it is an alloy, but I could still grind it down with a proper bit on my Dremel, but we'll see if I have to do that. Now I know these are a little bit too small, but I don't want to over drill them before I know exactly where things are going. Right there and right there. I hope this hasn't been boring for you guys. I'm sorry, I had to work out quite a bit of this project, of course, just as I go, and what I've been thinking over for the last year of trying to figure out how to do this. And now when it's coming to fruition, I'm just having to, get my way through some of the ideas that I had, the ones that work and the ones that don't work. It's part of the adventure for me, actually. Good, not too big, perfect. Just for all my loyal listeners, that's what she said. This is what I've ended up with right here. Now, take all this distracting stuff out of the way so you can see what's going on. I still have this quite high out of the, like it's at the high point. I can lower it down. Just give it a little wiggle there. So when it's in the water, I still hopefully have it above. Now I do have less weight back here now, and I think now that, of course, this, oh, that's just a little too low for my steering horn too. Darn it. So that's where it wants to go right there. Okay, steering horn clearance should be done. Flush holes, perfect. Pre-threaded holes to mount, good to go. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is to actually mount up the motor itself. I'm gonna take the chance. Wish me luck. Okay, so there we go. There is the new look, the updated look, where I actually have it almost right against the tailgate. Let's talk about electronics. So, what did I have left over in my drawer? Here is something that's way too powerful. This is a Swordfish 120 amp brushless water-cooled ESC that I'm going to run, and I'm only going to be running a 2S LiPo in this truck, guys, maybe a 3 if necessary, but really the amount, wouldn't it be great? I could probably push it, this would take a 6S LiPo. First, let me just hook up these ports to the motor from the ESC to get this all kind of grouped together, and say that I want to mount the ESC flat against the back tailgate like this. Okay, so for one of the last things I'm going to do for today, let's just talk about a little bit of aesthetics. Like, is it pleasing to look at? And right now, not so much, right? Again, I just folded these pool noodles into the chassis rails itself. The pool noodles are hollow in the middle, so the piece that I actually cut out to help compress, I just stuck right back in there again. I'm gonna use 3-inch Gorilla Tape, eh? Check that out, it is enormous. This is basically a waterproof threaded tape I've used for such a long time on the show. So I'm gonna take this, wrap it from the bottom, right over the piece I already had. Now you can start to see I'm hiding the flotation just a little bit. And instead of just laying it on there, I'm gonna kind of pull it up. Trying to suck in those sides a little bit like we all do in our older age. Move that part out, get that part right in there. And the reason why I'm doing that is just trying to compress everything so it holds nice and firm. Gonna do the same thing on the other side, just roll it around. Now I don't have as much surface area, unfortunately, here, but I'm still gonna try and do the same thing. Beautiful. Okay, if I turn it around, give it a mount. Basically just using what I have already. And that sits right about there. So if I shave that down a little bit, it would definitely look a little odd. And I could get in there with more black tape. But it really, if I had this covered up, you really couldn't tell too much other than you knew it was a flotation device of some sort. So there you go. Lots of work to be done still, but I'm definitely nearing the finish line. You guys know about the cable-driven steering already, so that's something I'm going to work on next. Now we've got it sitting exactly where I'd like it, and what I'd like to do is to go back down to the water and do another test to see how the flotation is doing before we put on the stabilizers. Actually, no, let's put the stabilizers on temporarily. I want to see how it does overall with the weight of almost everything we need inside. Just for the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape underneath the wheel well. This is only temporary. Then I'm going to come across like this. Okay, good. Those aren't going to move. They're not in the most stable position ever, and they're not in the final position of where they're going to be. But as you can see, we're so much closer. Okay, I'll put the screws in up there and then we'll head her down to the water. Okay, here we are with the new weight, the new hinge. I've got the battery in the back even though it's not hooked up. Nothing's hooked up yet, guys, other than the motor and everything for the truck itself. The outboard's not hooked up yet. I'm still in testing stages, which is quite a bit to do when you're trying to come up with something that's really never been done before. This weighs quite a bit, but I want to see how it sits in the water. Here we go. Oh my goodness, look at that. It's floating. The stabilizers are actually working and it almost looks, my goodness, let me get you off of the, well, here, before it floats away. I am taking on a little bit of water in the back only because I haven't sealed the holes from the screw holes that I've made. But I'm going to refloat this and get the camera down lower so you can see. Now, even though it's taking on water in the back a little bit, it looks like I have to take these barrels here and lower them down a little bit just so I can lift up the back of the truck, because as soon as we're under power, the weight is going to be pushed down, the nose is going to come up, and we're going to start taking on a bit of water here. But as you can see, we're sitting pretty nice. I just need these stabilizers to be lower just to give me a little bit more lift. Look at that, my friends. We're almost there. Thank you so much for being patient. A project like this does take time to do, and to do it properly, I want to make sure that we have some fun while we're doing this. Hopefully this crazy project is giving you guys some confidence to be crazy and silly with the hobby of RC, and of course to become part of our notification squad. Don't miss the unveiling of the TOYBOTA when everything's hooked up. Make sure to be a subscriber, give us a comment, a share, a like, click, and we'll see you in the next episode of RC Adventures. Now get outside and have fun with RC. Bye.